recently had this launch of a facility in Barbados called BIMPay, and of course, it was done. A lot of finale, a lot of stuff was done around it, and there were several questions that were raised with regards to it, and I want to raise some of these questions because in listening to the entire presentation from yourself, Fred, yourself, Umar, yourself, Naeem, there is so much interlinking with all of this information and all of these activities in a sense that we can see the movement of governments to control their citizens. That's the bottom line. No matter how they go about doing it, whether it be through vaccinations or through aspects of financial introductions of different aspects and so on, this is the move. This is the WEF recommendation to the governments across the world. Now, I remember, and I can't put my hand on it right now, but I remember the WEF pushing the whole aspect of digital ID. And they did a paper cautioning and warning governments of its abuse and the ability of a government to use it for surveillance and all the rest of it that we know. I'm sure you gentlemen know what is involved: the surveillance, the control, the limitation of what you can spend, where you can spend it, how far you can spend it, what you're spending it on. All of these are things we're talking about that unfortunately many citizens in our region don't take it seriously because, of course, I don't think we are as, what should I say, tech informed as many of the other larger countries in the world where they are actually happening. You take the UK, for example. I think you all would have recently heard that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom passed a law, or facilitated the passing of a law to prohibit young people under 16 years old from utilizing social media of any kind. And of course, they were attempting to force Google and WhatsApp and all the others to give them access to all the messages of everybody, so that they can monitor. They're trying to suggest, we don't know who is 16-year-old, so we have to monitor everybody and control everybody. And so we, to my mind, I see linking in all of the aspects of payment systems and so on. I see quite a lot has been shared with regards to. I'm just trying to find it here, with regards to BIMPay. I've done some research on it. They tell me that what you call it again, Fred, AI.
Yeah,
Listening to you, I had to smile. I wonder how many people are paying attention to the activity and the movement of AI, and the fact that in some instances the American government has actually removed certain aspects from their military involvement because this system is beginning to activate itself. It's beginning to run itself. It's beginning to educate itself. It is going outside of the control of human individuals, and now we're hearing of its ability to do things without any human intervention or anything of that nature. And so a lot of these things that we're hearing, you're quite right, Fred, in indicating that a lot of what we are seeing introduced bit by bit and in as innocent a manner as possible are being orchestrated by outside of the Caribbean and outside of Barbados.
precisely.
With more specific reference, if I may say so, to the WEF and
Precisely.
an aspect of the EU where our good lady von der Leyen, I think is her name, who is hated. I don't know how many people are aware of it. She's hated by hundreds of the parliamentarians in the European Union. They want her out of the position. She's not even an elected official. She's appointed. And they really want to get rid of her with regards to this. And so, people may be wondering, how are you linking the BIMPay? But we're talking here about matters of privacy, and we're talking here about matters of freedom. And so when we start to talk about the involvement, as you laid out so well, Fred, when you start to talk about all of these pardon the expression, all of these hackabilities, if I can put it that way,
Yeah.
of us as human individuals, the access to our accounts. Because I understand that when you activate BIMPay, you have to tie it to your bank account.
Well,
Now,
even more egregiously, I'm not crossing you there.
that's all right.
The problem with BIMPay is that, number one, first and foremost, the public needs to understand that this is a scam. And number two is that you may have a regular bank account, and when you log on to your regular bank account, the minute that you log on to your bank account is accessed by BIMPay. So that means that the banks have already been compromised, and you cannot carry out a second transaction unless you click on the BIMPay and go through the entire process. The minute that you click on BIMPay, you cannot access your account until you finish the sign up process. And when you finish the sign up process, the government now has access of all of your finances.
And we saw what happened in Canada. We saw what
Precisely.
happened in Canada during the
Precisely.
pandemic.
Exactly. Now, what BIMPay is to the public is that it has been launched to the public as a convenience. It is a scam, and I'll tell you the reason why it's a scam. BIMPay has absolutely no value commodity to back it up. It's not backed up by gold, silver, or any
No,
precious metal. No.
no.
Even more alarming is that it is tied to the Visa MasterCard system of the Zionist banking world with servers based in New York. Even more egregiously, it is linked to the Pan-African payment system with servers based in Nigeria, the scam artist, con artist capital of the world. And even more alarming, the World Economic Forum controls both countries, and Barbados is a World Economic Forum compliant society.
Correct. Correct.
Okay? At the end of the day, Barbadians are going to lose every single cent of their money. Why? Because the World Economic Forum laid out in 2021 that the protocol for the Great Reset was the impoverishing of the middle class in order to facilitate a fascist government takeover by impoverishing the middle class, disabling the ability for the economy to function. And what happened in 2024 with Ursula von der Leyen present in Barbados? Does the public remember what happened in 2024? In 2024, we had the Caribbean Heads of Government Summit here in Barbados. And the Prime Minister of Barbados stood up and told the public and the world that $6 billion of funding were on cash were in local banks. I will share the link so that you can see it for yourself. And that the government needed to access this money in order to build out renewable energy. If you wanted to steal or you wanted to carry out a programmed, deliberate, engineered heist of $6 billion, how would you do it? BIMPay makes sense now? Ursula von der Leyen left Barbados and went back to the European Union and publicly announced that she was going to do the exact same thing and access 60 billion euros of European finance savings in order to fund the war in Ukraine. And she did the exact same thing.
That.
She did the exact same thing by implementing a payment system in Europe called WERO, W-E-R-O. And that WERO has disenfranchised 30% of Europeans. The money is gone. And what is the overall situation with regard to the Caribbean, with regard to Miss Madam's operations? We have a Ponzi scheme running in the background all the time called the Bridgetown Initiative. That is where the money is going.
Are you speaking of Dubai on steroids? Is that what you're speaking about?
The Bridgetown Initiative is the Ponzi scheme where all the money is going. Okay, and
I know what you mean.
The Barbadian public is going to lose every single cent of their $6 billion in savings, and there's nothing that they will be able to do about it. Okay, so now you know. No,
well, you know, again,
just look at this scenario. Just look at this scenario, and I had this conversation. I had this conversation with a family member. In the age of AI, because don't forget, BIMPay now has an AI perspective to it. AI has been added as an addition to the algorithm, artificial intelligence. And I said to this family member, just as a business person, imagine a hacker getting into the BIMPay system, because it's so porous, and because there are servers in Africa, as well as in the United States of America, and the servers being controlled at will. Hacker getting into the system and setting up an artificial intelligence front company purporting to be a legitimate company, and being able to access the finances of every single person that is attracted to the vending of certain products or commodities or so on. But it's an artificial intelligence company, and cleaning those companies out overnight. You could lose every single thing in half a day. Then that is the reality of what BIMPay can do to a society. Not only that, but if Barbados decides that, oh, BIMPay is in place and so on, and we have a change of government, and the government says, well, I don't agree with this situation, so let us look at an alternative and so on. The people that control the servers in Lagos, Nigeria, as well as New York City can say, oh, really? You think that that's what you're going to do? Click, turn off your finances. Government is bankrupt overnight. Now you understand what BIMPay can do. Okay? You still want to do it? You still want to sign up for BIMPay? Right.
I certainly won't be doing that.
Well,
I
there you
can
go.
assure you, I certainly
Right.
won't be doing it. And I mean, I made that
Right.
decision because I was well aware of the move of the WEF in terms of the control, the 15-minute cities, the whole
Right.
aspect of controlling what you can spend in terms of gas, how much fuel you will be able to use. I don't think people are aware of all of these things, no matter
No,
how
not
much we
only that,
try.
but boss,
No matter how much
well,
we try to educate.
yeah, not to cross you, not to cross you. But there's another thing that has to be mentioned here. BIMPay is set up as a subscriber service. Okay, you sign up for it, and so on. But what people don't realize is that BIMPay takes your money through deductibles. For every single purchase that you make using BIMPay, something is deducted. So there are three deductibles that happen: the vendor, the supplier, and the distributor. Okay, that happens three times with every single transaction. Boom, boom, boom. How long is it going to take before the middle class is completely and totally out of pocket, and small businesses as well as medium-sized businesses have to close their doors because the money is not traceable? And I'll tell you the reason why the money is not traceable. I'm going to read something to you. The public needs to know this information. Okay, it is absolutely important that the public know about this information. I wrote this to a very good friend of mine who is a lawyer, who was asking me, Fred, I need information badly. Okay, I want to find out what is actually going on. Okay, because what was happening is that people were coming to him and telling him that this telephone scam, where people are calling from numbers from Nigeria and from the US and so on, and all of a sudden their bank accounts are docked like $300 and so on and so forth. I need to read this to the public. I want the public to listen very carefully to what I'm about to read to you. Here we go. This telephone scam is actually of Israeli origin due to a civilian version of the Pegasus communication software that was developed by Israel's Cyber Warfare Unit 8200 in 2004, under the direction of former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak. This telephone scam operation was initially used as an extortionist tool against Middle Eastern individuals of interest to the Israeli Defense Forces, whom were targeted as part of the cybersecurity information warfare against Hamas, Hezbollah, and other so-called terror units in the region. It was subsequently expanded to include cyber robbery of the Palestinians, whose bank accounts would suddenly be frozen or deleted entirely if suspected of any collaboration with Hamas or other suspected operatives. Fast forward to the Ukraine war and Israel's direct cyber warfare program with Ukraine in 2022, and the cyber robbery project was being used globally to rob unsuspecting people of their funds, to support the corrupt military officials and other players in the region with massive inflows of illegally obtained funding for themselves, and to fund other corrupt organizations involved in prostitution, human trafficking, arms dealing, human organs trafficking, child trafficking, and drug trafficking. All of the above were actually made legal in Ukraine under the Obama administration when the US installed 26 BSL-3 and BSL-4 biolab laboratories within former Soviet Union facilities all across Ukraine, which created a transnational legal loophole in the local laws that created the cover for these types of operations. In 2023, the Russian military interdicted these operations and publicly exposed their operations to the United Nations and the global media, which resulted in the cyber robbery operations being quickly transferred to other European countries and Africa. Today, it is rapidly advancing all across other African states, with the exception of Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, whom, under direct Russian intelligence guidance, have introduced and enforce strict cybersecurity architecture to support their economic cooperative agreements with Russia and to reinforce their formation of the Alliance of Sahel States organization. African migrants from Nigeria and other African states who have been given carte blanche entry into the Caribbean under the misguided impetus of the Barbados Prime Minister are with impunity using this technology to empower direct remittances via the Barbados and Caribbean Digital Pay System, CAPS, which is directly linked to the Barbados BIMPay and Pan-African Payment System. What this means is any telephone that is used to transact a cyber robbery is effectively exonerated from the crime due to the app linkage being enabled across all regions, thus effectively eradicating the possibility of successful prosecution of digital cyber robbery crimes. So there you have it. Can't be
Well,
any more.
in addition to this, Fred, I got a message sent to me to do with, I don't know if you all are familiar with the name of the gentleman. His name is Larry Fink. I don't know if that name rings a bell to you all,
Yep.
but he's the
Yep.
BlackRock CEO.
That's right.
And while it is not referencing Barbados, when I read the information sent to me, I got very concerned. And this is what it says, and I quote: in his high-profile 2026 annual chairman's letter to the investors, BlackRock CEO Larry Fink laid out a stark economic reality: the trillions of dollars required to construct data centers. And of course, gentlemen, we are considering the construction of a data center at Greenland in St. Andrew here in Barbados. I don't know what you're doing in Trinidad or what's happening with you in Trinidad, but we have also seen, I can't remember how many, 30 or 40 projected data centers having to pull back in the US because of the resistance of the population within those areas. And I continue, goodness gracious me, sorry. I continue my quote. My phone just did something that I'm not 100% sure what I did. Okay, sorry. I think I'm back to it. He went on to say, and I'm just reading from the extract. He said the trillions of dollars required to construct data centers, power grids, and energy infrastructure cannot be funded by tech companies or governments alone. Instead, it must come, and I'd like people to hear this, it must come from the capital markets, no problem, fueled directly, listen to this, fueled directly by the savings accounts and pension funds of ordinary citizens.
There you go. There you go.
This is the CEO Larry Fink of BlackRock speaking. BlackRock, we are familiar with BlackRock in Barbados. We're familiar with it. And so, sometimes when you hear a person speaking loyal opposition, those of you who are going to be even watching this video after we are finished the show, when you hear people like Mr. Corbyn, Mr. Abdullah, and Mr. Hussein speaking, you begin to realize that these are not conspiracy theorists, because you're hearing the confirmation coming from other forums and people who are totally independent of them, who do not know them, and they do not know those individuals either. And, I hesitate to say 1,000 Frenchmen can't be wrong, because sometimes they can be. I hesitate to state that. But, you can't have two things being said that are diametrically opposite and yet both be true. One has to be truth and one has to be a lie. And if there's one thing I have observed across the world since the pandemic has concluded, is the significant lack of distrust of anything called government by everybody. This is not just by people in Barbados. It's in Trinidad, it's in Jamaica, it's in St. Vincent, it's in the entire European Union. The entire European Union do not trust their governments. And we are seeing and hearing this on a daily basis. And I think it's very important for our people to realize that a lot of what is happening here in Barbados is a part of what has been already established where the World Economic Forum is concerned for the global elitists, if you wanted to put it that way, and in terms of an agenda that is driving countries. That's one of the reasons that certain people they don't like, and I hesitate to call any names, but certain people they don't like because they don't toe the line. But such is the case. I'm not going to call the Fred. You know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to say any more on that one. But we do have to be very mindful of these matters, and I found it very interesting, gentlemen. I know we've moved on to another aspect of this because I do want to try and tie things together in terms of, sometimes people talk about public health, but don't realize that within the world that we live today, these things are tied in with finance. They're tied in with your freedoms. These are facts.
Mhm.
But I want to just quickly move on to some other information that came to me. And I found it very, very interesting. The central bank governor, Fred, again, I think you can confirm this. I believe the central bank governor recently made the comment that Barbados will not become a cashless society. I think I heard him make that statement in a press conference.
I did as well.
Right. And of course, there is always the perspective that we're moving toward a cashless society. And we are seeing this all over the world. I can't remember the African country where the people got up the very next morning and found that they could not access their bank accounts through an ATM or anything of the sort. I can't remember the name of the country.
Kenya. That was Kenya.
Thank you. That's correct. That was Kenya. So these are not things that we are throwing out there, pulling things out of the air, anything of the sort. But recently, as I was doing my research, I discovered that there are countries that have enshrined in their constitution the perspective that their societies must remain a society where cash is used.
Yeah, well, that's the Swiss government just did that.
Yes, the Swiss government just did that. Let me see when they did that. They did that in 2026, this year.
Yep, 3 days ago.
Slovenia also did it in 2025. Hungary did it in 2025 as well. Slovakia did it in 2023, and there are a number of other countries listed. Austria, for example, is looking into this matter.
And Vietnam as well.
Yes, and as it relates to ensuring, and while here in Barbados there's no constitutional protection. The only constitutional protection really in Barbados is property rights and other fundamental freedoms, but it does not currently contain any explicit constitutional rights to use cash.
Well, the thing is, what we have to remember, Doc, is that the entire digital ID and cashless system is actually illegal. And this was brought to the attention of the European Union by a European lawyer, who publicly stated
I saw that
the illegality of a digital ID and CBDC, or digital payment system, is direct constitutional infringement of the public rights and public freedoms and public privacy. And it has only been put in place by private sector operations. Now, this explains how Caribbean governments have used the private sector to implement their agenda. Okay? Remember, and I draw this example very clearly. The government of Barbados never mandated the public to take a COVID-19 biological weapon injection. The Barbados government never made that decision. What they did is that they coerced and threatened the private sector that if they did not do it, import licenses and banking restrictions would take place.
Right.
And the private sector went along with it. The private sector took the responsibility to enforce the implementation of the biological weapon. And now the private sector is doing exactly the same via the banks to implement BIMPay. Do you understand? You see where the homogenization of the government with medical, with the judiciary, with the police, are creating an environment where the public and the private sector has no choice. That is wrong. That is unconstitutional. You cannot
Yeah, yeah.
have that happen because you are violating the entire rights and principles of a free society. In addition to that, when you start to restrict the ability for people to use cash, you are creating the environment for the inciting of civil unrest.
But you know, I wanted to ask this question, and of all three of you, we've moved into this aspect of the protection of cash. And of course, one of the things about cash is you can't track it.
Mhm.
And here I'm not talking about money laundering. I'm just talking about the use of cash. You can track my debit card. You can track my credit card. You can track cash. When I pay for something with cash, you can't tell what I bought, how much I spent, where I've spent it, how far I am from my home. None of those things you can control. Those are matters that are being attempted to be introduced in the United Kingdom even as we speak now.
Yep.
And these are facts that if you go to the appropriate sites, you'll find the information is there. But let me ask you this, gentlemen: why do you think it matters? What do you think is the why does it matter that we protect the use of cash, particularly within our countries? And Fred, I'm going to throw this to the two Trinidadians, because I would have to say we have somewhat of a CARICOM grouping here tonight, um, and one of them I would have to say very bold, because we've seen some actions on the behalf of your Prime Minister that leave me smiling, and I'm not going to say much more than that. But why do you think there is this attempt in these other countries to protect cash, and here in our region, we don't have the same tenacity, so to speak.
Well, I can clearly let me give you all this bit of information. I remember our present Prime Minister, Governor Prasad Visasa, when she was in opposition, did criticize the then government for hinting um, uh, that this digital currency um, journey that they were upon. And she did mention at that time that, let the people decide for themselves which is which way they want to go. If a person wants to use cash, let them use cash. If they wants to use a debit card, let them have the free will to do so, etc., etc. What I've noticed, however, even even with those countries who have said that they want to preserve the use of cash and so on, what we find happening in reality is people are being forced, given no choice whatsoever, because of the system that is being placed and put in place to indulge themselves in non-cash transactions. And what this does, it encourages and it influences people's decision. And most times, because of the convenience that is allowed and that is given, because of the convenience, people tend to accept the non-cash transactions. And eventually, what you think is going to happen, even if a government says that they want to protect that institution, the system is built in such a way, it's being driven in such a way that people would automatically choose cashless options as opposed to cash because of the difficulty that will be that they will find themselves in, or the challenges that they may find themselves in with respect to cash. Presently, in Trinidad and Tobago, um, no longer you can go to the bank institution and deposit cash to another person's account. They're telling you that you need to deposit this in your bank account. Now, if you don't have a bank account, you have to set up a bank account. So you want to stay away from the banking system. You want to stay away from that system altogether. and you're using cash totally. So you have to send cash to somebody, and you go to the bank and you said you want to send this cash to this particular person. They said no, you have to deposit it in your account, and they will take it out from your account and they will send it to the person. Of course, there's going to be a charge for that, and there's going to be a charge to take out the money, and there's going to be a charge that they're going to charge the person for putting it in their
Each
account,
part will
etc.,
be
etc. Each transaction is going to be a charge. All right, and this is how they be doing their thing. All right. Now the question is, why it is so important to protect that? Why it is important, because it creates opportunities for the less fortunate within the society. All right, it creates opportunities for them to buy, to trade, to sell, and all these things without having the difficulty in acquiring an account or acquiring a bank card, etc., etc. And what you find happening as a result of this, your real value is going to remain with the cash. Now, if you put cash into the bank today, I take $500 and I put it in the bank. In 6 months' time, that $500 that I've saved in the bank, which the bank encourages you to do, all right, will depreciate. And my $500 that was valued 500 today will no longer value 500 6 months from now, sitting in a bank. But if I take that $500 in cash and I go to buy arrows and I put it on a table in the market and I sell those arrows at a profit, right? My $500 will increase in value, all right? But the banks don't want you to do that. They want to encourage you to save. Save where? In their banks, in their institution, where your money will sit there and depreciate as time goes on and on and on. All right. And what we have to start figuring out is how it is. And we have a system in Trinidad where we citizens have tried to counter that system. We have a susu system in Trinidad where people, put money in a
Yeah, yeah.
particular in a fund, right, a cash fund,
Mhm.
and that is paid out after a
Yep.
certain period of time to the individuals who are part of that program. All right, and they get a cash lump sum in their hands, and they can now able to do a number of things that they were planning to do. It's like a savings plan, but you're saving it outside of the bank. All right, and your cash, retains its value at all given point in time. So it's very important for us to understand that, and we have to start building communities like that. All right, we have to start setting up our agricultural, transactions where we buy produce and we sell produce and so on. We have to start encouraging persons to trade only in cash. All right, we have to start encouraging people to buy and sell only in cash. We have to start encouraging each other, in these type of cash transactions, because if it is we move away from it and we get too accustomed with the quote unquote the convenience of it, all right, we're going to get caught, and we're going to get caught in a whirlwind that is going to take us down, and it will be easier for them to put systems in place that's going to entrap us and entrap us and entrap us even more. So what I'm saying is that even though your country, all right, as we've heard Prime Minister Prasad Bisasa said it, all right, and she may indicate to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago that she's not interested in going, she's, that way. The system itself is set in such a way that people will be forced, they'll be influenced, they'll be coerced into moving in that direction, so little by little. All right. I find myself caught up in it as well. All right. I wouldn't like to say, but the thing about it is that we have to be very conscious of how we allow this to take control. And as your program would have indicated, or the question that has been asked, who controls the future? I think the real question we ought to be asking um, is who should control the future? And that answer should be the people, the citizens. And we should not allow government institutions, government, banking institutions, policy institutions, and these private institutions like BlackRock and so on to dictate our lives and to tell us how we should live, how we should spend, and how we should enjoy our lives. And this is something that I think the citizens are not taken too seriously. And we are being caught up in the dragnet of distractions, all right? And why these vaccine injuries are not being heard of, why this is not being heard of, why that is not being heard of, because every Monday morning we have something that is grand happening in politics. And they distract us with these things, and they caught us with, and they catch us on the talk show programs and the television programs and the news and so on, and they keep talking about these things over and over and get the people all riled up and talking and adding their 2 cents. And social media is a light with all these conversations, while in secret we have these devastations taking place in our society, and no one is paying attention to it because of the distractions. And I think that's important for me to look at. And we need to recognize, as I said, we need to hold on to our cash. The more we use cash,
Wow.
is the more we put value in our dollar, and the more value we are going to get in return. And that is the most important point for us to understand why it is we need to protect our cash.
Well, before I ask you, Naeem, to share your thoughts on this, because I'm sure you have your ideas and so on with regards to it. But, Fred, you said something just now. The government didn't mandate the utilization of vaccines in Barbados, but they got the private sector and the public sector as well, too, because there were people in the public sector who couldn't go to work unless they took the vaccine. It would not surprise me in the least if the same thing happens where cash is concerned, where you go to a business and right, you go to a business to transact business, and you're told, sorry, we don't take cash here.
It happened to me this week.
But but I want to say this to you, Fred. This happened to me. You're not going to believe this. This happened to me. I'm trying to remember. Back in 1983 or 84, I was in Anaheim, California, for a conference, and I walked into a store to buy my wife a gift. I was only married to her for a year. And so, of course, I was traveling. I wanted to get her something. And, back in those days, you remember we used to travel with what they call them again now, the not checks, traveler's checks.
Yeah.
We used to travel traveler's checks, and I didn't want to be traveling with any traveler's checks. I had cash, and I walked into a jewelry store to buy my wife a piece of jewelry, and they told me the price of it. And I took out the cashier, and I was told, "Sorry, we don't accept that here." I couldn't believe it, and I was in an American store using American money. I was not in Europe. I was not in the UK. I was in the United States. And so it would not surprise me in the least that we see this beginning to come to pass. And to your comment, Umar, who should control the future? We are a republic only in political rhetoric. We are republics. You're a republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Is that right? We're Republic of Barbados, Republic of Guyana. But that's only in political rhetoric, because the republic is by the people, for the people, of the people. That is the definition of a republic. And that is not what we are seeing in any of our republics. What we're seeing in our republics are a limited number of people controlling the entire affair and the entire aspect. Your thoughts, Naeem?
Okay, in terms of the data centers, I should let you all know that this is something that our Prime Minister here in Trinidad has mentioned, indicated that she wants to start one in the south of Trinidad. I do know that there are also individuals who were involved in crypto mining are now running what I would call micro data centers here in Trinidad as well. In terms of the going cashless here in Trinidad and Tobago, I think there they are putting down the foundation for that, in that a lot of government offices are no longer accepting cash. You have to have your ATM card or your debit card, credit card, or what have you at hand to access certain services within certain government offices here in Trinidad. So they're definitely laying the groundwork for us to go cashless. We spoke about the mandates, the injection mandates, and you would have said that the Mia Motley would have engaged the private sector to coerce workers into accepting these injections. What was done here was our government introduced something called a safe zone policy. And this safe zone policy was introduced into certain sectors, such as I think the banking sector, the hospitality sector as well. So all those who working within those industries had to take the injections in order to continue to work. So in my mind, it was up to the private sector whether or not they were going to accept this safe zone policy. But it did nothing. They went ahead with it, and a lot of workers would have been coerced to take these injections, and some of them are now suffering as a result of it. The thing about it, we got to learn that a lot of these establishments or corporations received incentives to implement this safe zone policy at their workplaces. You understand? So even some would have chosen to close down and not implement it at all. But they themselves would have actually received incentives to do so. You understand? So that's how they would have coerced the general public into accepting these gene therapies. I want to give you a practical example of the disadvantage of cashless. And this is from my personal experience. I would have had back in 2018, I would have had a debit card running on the Visa platform. Now, a debit card, as you all know, and just to make it clear to those listening, if that is your money in your bank account, you are accessing through your card. It works like a credit card, but it's your money, or supposed to be your money. So this particular debit card allowed me to make purchases online, in other words, foreign purchases, and also do purchases at merchants here locally in Trinidad. So I was quite comfortable using it for foreign purchases as well as local purchases. So there was a long weekend that came up, and I went to the grocery store to purchase some small items and what have you. Picked up my items, went to the cashier, and I didn't have any cash with me. I just had a debit card and a credit card. So I chose to pay with my debit card, and it was declined. But that particular account is an account that I monitor regularly. So I found it very strange that it was declined. So I told the girl, I said, well, try it again. She tried it again, same thing, declined. I said, no, something has to be wrong. Tried it again, declined. So I had no choice but to pay with the credit card. I paid with the credit card and it went through. So like I said, it was a long weekend. I think that was the holiday was Friday. So I had to wait until Monday of the next week to contact the bank. I contacted the bank and they told me they would call me back. They called me back the very next day. And they told me, yes, they had to stop the card. They canceled the card, the debit card. Now, this is my funds we're talking about. It's not their funds. And I have no financing with the bank, no loans or anything like that to say that they will have to put a hold on it. So I asked why. Why would you cancel my card? Why are you not allowing any transactions to go through? They told me that I used it for too many foreign purchases. Right? But get ready for this. When I signed the contract for that particular debit card, I I went through it with a fine-tooth comb, especially looking for the limits to foreign exchange access, and there was none. Right, so which would lead me to believe I could up spend foreign exchange up to the value of what is in my account. But they stopped my local transaction and access to my card and my funds because they felt that I used it for too many foreign purchases. So I just saying this to give you all an example of what will come with this CBDC system. Right? They can switch you on and off. They can deny you essential services and products that you will need for day-to-day life just because you do not meet a certain score. You understand? And this is what is to come. But
Well, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
right. So, but there will be some, I think I said this before, there will be some level of cool, even though they're promising that they would not go cashless, right? Those who have who would have accepted the digital currency, they would access more services and have more advantages than those who insist on using cash. You understand?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's where the level of coercion will come.
Well, if they can't get you to respond in a mandated format, they'll do a behind the scenes mandated format. That's how they will operate.
Well, we have to also recognize that once, I mean, a country saying that we are not going cashless, but they have to understand, or people have to understand, the world has to understand that country does not exist on its own. All right, they have to trade with other trading partners, etc., who may not necessarily buy into that narrative.
Yeah, may not
Right.
subscribe to that.
So you're gonna have to find a way to be able to purchase and goods and services without cash, because those societies or those communities or those countries that you'll be trading with and your trading partners, they have gone cashless. All right. So where does that leave you? All right. And this is and this is the what's the word, oxymoron. I mean, this is what is very, very troubling to me. And why is are we being told that this and that and the other, when I know in reality how this actually works, and eventually this is what is going to happen. And that's why it's more and more important that we understand, and I keep saying it all the time, the people has to understand how much power they wield. And this small group of people at the top who writes our policies and decides on how it is we should live and operate and so on and so forth, we allow them to continue to do that by our compliance. And if we are non-compliant, they cannot continue to rule, and they cannot continue to operate with impunity like that.
Wow.
I think one of our greatest advantages that we do have in the Caribbean region is actually the fact that we are fragmented geographically. And while that may be looked at as a massive disadvantage geographically, it actually is an advantage, because what it does allow is that it allows every single Caribbean territory to become its own independent, sovereign, competitive entity in a prosperous economic environment. Now, how do you create a prosperous economic environment in the global sphere where totalitarian fascism is quickly becoming the rising law of the land? And I've said this many, many times before, and I will continue to say it. The success and the prosperity of the Caribbean going forward into the darkness of the perceived darkness of the modern world, which is quickly becoming apparent. If we are going to survive, not only as a region, but are we going to survive as a people, every single person in the Caribbean region that understands the existential threat not only to our economies but to us as a people has to unify our collective consciousness in being able to understand that a single Caribbean currency is going to have to be implemented. And if you have a single Caribbean currency which is leveled on the playing field of value, and I have suggested in my podcast for the last 4.5 years that we revalue all of our currencies across the Caribbean region to align with the 9 country OECS value. So all of the countries' currencies would be valued at the EC dollar. Okay, you would retain your denomination name, Barbados dollar, Jamaica dollar, Trinidad dollar, whatever it is, but the value is the same across all 18 territories, backed by gold.
Hmm.
You have a value-backed commodity backing up
That's the key.
a single financial currency, a
That's the
single
key.
financial currency. The key is backing it by gold. Now, how do we do that? We actually have 4 countries in the Caribbean region that can produce the gold to do that. However, those gold mines are owned by foreign entities. We have to nationalize those gold mines in order to create the sovereignty for the Caribbean region to produce its own gold to support a single currency. Now, there are other ways we can do this. We can support the nationalization of gold by creating energy sovereignty, and that is the most accessible and the most quickly accessible. The Caribbean region sits on the second largest oil reserves in the entire world, which stretch from the Gulf of Mexico 270 miles past Barbados into the Atlantic Ocean. Every single Caribbean country is sitting on a wealth of oil and gas. There is no reason for the Caribbean region to be not a prosperous region, particularly if it goes to the point where you can have a single currency that is aligned with a basket of international currencies. The Chinese yuan, South Korean dong, Russian ruble, and all of these countries who utilize gold as their currency backed collateral. If you do a single Caribbean currency and you have energy security where profits from oil and gas can be used to support the cash flow to build the gold market that supports your single currency, the Caribbean region becomes the 5th largest investment scenario in the Western Hemisphere. Prosperity for the region is virtually assured. What are we doing about it? We have Caribbean politicians that are sitting on their hands doing absolutely nothing with regard to this. Okay, and a classic case in point is Jamaica. Oil and gas was discovered in Jamaica in 1926, just 19 miles southwest of Kingston. 6 billion barrels of oil estimated in 1926. It could be far more than that. It could be far more than that. In addition to that, Jamaica has an active gold industry, the Black River Gold Mine, which a Canadian company is currently exploiting. So we have 5 countries in the Caribbean that can produce gold: Jamaica, Cuba, Haiti, Guyana, Suriname. Fine, done. What are we doing? A single Caribbean currency backed by gold, produced indigenously within the region, supported by the cash flow of oil and gas, creates the environment for a prosperous Caribbean society for the 22nd century. The most important thing is getting rid of the yard fowls, okay, in government who want all of it for themselves. You said that there was no republic. Well, that's exactly what we do. We don't have republics. We have yard fowls right now. Okay. So we have to think clearly and move forward.
Well, Burkina Faso has set an example, I think, for
There you
us,
go.
wouldn't you say?
Yeah, of
I
course.
think,
The thing
yeah,
is,
yeah.
look at the alliance. Look at the Sahel Alliance, which I mentioned in my reading a couple of minutes ago. The Sahel Alliance has brought together the 3 most prosperous countries in Central West Africa. Now, when you look at the geographics with regard to that alliance, is that you have Mali to the east, Burkina Faso to the south, and Niger to the west. What is the number one connecting demographic of those three countries? The River Niger. The River Niger, its headquarters are in Guinea-Bissau, and it flows east through Niger into Burkina Faso, into Mali, and back into Nigeria to the Nigerian River Delta. That particular watercourse has gold, diamonds, platinum, silver, and all of the natural resources, precious metals. And I've been to Burkina Faso and I've visited a gold mine. And one of the most important things that was happening there is that this was currently, at that time, was under French rule. They were able to extract gold with very, very little mining. It was virtually on the surface. At the end of the day, Burkina Faso has set the example for Niger and Mali to join them, to be able to create an alliance that has done exactly what I've just described for the Caribbean region. Because now they're discussing a single currency for those three countries, backed by who? Gold-backed commodity, and they're selling the gold to Russia and China. It's only a matter of time before the country is now in a situation where signing economic cooperative development agreements with Russia and China has brought prosperity to a people who once thought it was hopeless to even progress. We can do the same in the Caribbean region. We're sitting on our hands because we have yard fouls in government.
Well, we don't. We also don't. We also don't have military leaders that would take the kind of action that the leader in Burkina Faso has taken, because that was the only thing that they could resort to because of what was happening at the time.
I completely agree. I completely agree.
And to be honest with you, when you look around the world, and particularly in Africa, because, you hear all of this, and I'm not changing the subject, but you hear all of this rhetoric about climate change and all of this kind of stuff that's going on. And we hear Barbados is looking at drilling oil off of our coast. You hear Namibia, I think it is now looking to drill oil off of their area down there as well. I think somebody just nationalized their oil industry, Fred.
Yep.
Which African country is it? Just nationalized. They removed all of the foreign refineries and are doing their own refinery.
Yeah, I think that was Angola.
Yeah, one of them just this minute did it. But you see, in those countries, you're dealing with elements where, I guess to some degree, you have a real aspect of separation of powers, where you don't have a president who can dictate to the army, and so when the army see things going amiss that is not in the interest of the people, they can take action. We don't have those kinds of setups in the Caribbean area. I'm almost tempted to say regrettably, and some people might think to hear me as a religious minister speaking in this manner, but I think we have to begin to face realities and begin to take substantive action. Because there are those elements that you pray about, but I think I remember correctly, I think it's in the book of James that he makes the statement, faith without works is dead. So there's an aspect that you pray about things. Yes, we do. But we have to take action. We have to do things. We have to implement things. We have a judicial system that is two-tiered. If it's two-tiered, I would have to go as far as saying maybe even three-tiered, for that matter. So we can't trust our judicial system. We definitely can't trust our political system. There are questions being raised where the police are concerned, and you are almost left in a lurch as to what do you do? To whom do you go? Recently I suggested that in the context within our recent issues here on the island with guns and the implementation of gang legislation and gun courts, that it would, if I was in a position to do it, I would invite a country with whom I have bilateral agreements and a right to have those bilateral agreements to send investigators in to engage with the matters of the gun violence and, for that matter, corruption, because I think it was the former leader of the opposition, Mr. Thorne, in a brass tacks interview, made the comment that the only thing we're doing is going after the low-hanging fruit, but we're not dealing with the upper echelons of this aspect. And it would appear to me that this is the case across the board because, again, Fred, you were discussing the aspect that when the government wanted to do something, they didn't go for the low-hanging fruit. They went straight to the top. And that's
There
the
you go.
private sector, the CEOs and, the corporations and so on. So I believe that there is a sense in which, as citizens, we are almost at a loss as to what we can do. And incidentally, we had a few persons, Fred, ask with regards to, as I was following along in the chat, in the statements, in the comments, I saw a couple of people request contacts for detoxing. If there were persons, that you could direct them to in terms of the detoxing aspect, that is something you could probably send to Dave, and he can just confirm, whether it's something we can release. And if
Yeah.
that is the case, he will forward it. He will forward it here in the chat. But there were a couple of persons who did request that information. And I think one or two people that asked for your number. What I will say to those persons who are asking to contact Mr. Corbyn is that you give the Marcy Week Show a call at 236-7000 and leave your information with us. And we will pass that information on to Mr. Corbyn, and he will make the decision then in terms of contacting you. Okay? So if you do that, that would be much appreciated. But gentlemen, we are coming down to the last 22 minutes of the show. I want to thank all of you for staying with us throughout the entire time, Mr. Hossein. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I've always had a difficulty pronouncing Trinidadian names. But I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. I want to thank you particularly because I was made aware that you may not have been able to stay with us. But I want to thank you for, remaining with us and engaging in the discussion.